that allowed international inspectors to ensure their compliance.
You don't know when that expired. It would have
Can
expired
you actually just let me speak for like one frickin' second, bro?
Sure.
Thank you so much. There was a deal. And Trump came in and said, I can get a better deal. And he ripped it up. And he didn't get a better deal. And then he went into that country at the request of another country's leader, and he spent $50 billion.
In this video, Leigh McGowan, also known as Politics Girl, appeared on Abby Phillip's show as part of a panel discussion focused on the growing divisions inside the MAGA movement, especially as figures like Megyn Kelly have recently started openly criticizing the president over his controversial foreign policy decisions. In this segment, we will review clips from that panel on Abby Phillip's show, which also featured Peter Meyer, Neera Tanden, Noah Rothman, Margaret Donovan, and Sarah Fisher. I also share my own thoughts, so let's watch into it together.
And I was listening to John Kerry, who was involved in previous negotiations with Israel, and tonight, and he said, look, he pitched Bush, he pitched Obama, he pitched. We actually have that clip. Actually, let's go ahead and listen.
Well, I was part of any number of conversations with Prime Minister Netanyahu, conversations that took place in other countries.
Pitching the U.S. to strike Iran.
Yes, he wanted us to strike. He came to President Obama. He made a presentation to ask to strike. President Obama refused. President Biden refused. President Bush refused. The only president who has agreed to this, obviously, is President Trump.
So, under those circumstances, I think this is a unique situation that Trump has put the United States in at a time when this is kind of shocking. I mean, after October 7th, there was so much goodwill toward Israel after what they faced. But now today, the unfavorable view of Israel is at 60% of American adults nationwide, according to Pew. That is significantly worse than it was just a few years ago, just 4 years ago. So I think Americans are starting to wonder whether or not all of this is in our best interest.
No, I think we will know 6 months from now, a year from now, 18 months from now. I mean, if you look at that timeline and Israel's approving post October 7th, you look at America standing in the world post 9/11. Once you start to react to an attack that has been inflicted upon you, people don't like that. They like the idea of somebody bearing that wound and not trying to make justice for it, not trying to go after those perpetrators. That is just a cold, hard fact that we have seen time and again.
But who's running America's foreign policy?
But our response to 9/11 was popular at the time when we did it. It actually was popular.
The Afghan war? Yes,
yeah.
That was popular.
I mean, so that's different from where we stand right now. I think that people are questioning whether this is just never-ending conflict.
What Peter Meyer is saying there honestly does not make much sense to me, because it is not that people are against countries responding after being attacked. That is not really the issue here. The real concern is about excessive retaliation, which is exactly what we've been seeing. And at the same time, the American people simply do not want to be pulled into someone else's war. If the United States itself is attacked, then that is a completely different situation. But what keeps happening is that the country either gets dragged into conflicts or makes the choice to enter wars where it was not even directly attacked in the first place.
Kind of sleepwalked into, effectively.
I mean, I think the most dangerous part of this, honestly, is the New York Times reporting that Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu, said this basically gave Trump this perception in contrast to our own intelligence community that this would be one and done, the regime would collapse, they would not take the Strait of Hormuz. And our own intelligence community said that's a fantasy. And Trump went, I mean, I think the challenge here is that it seems that President Trump ignored his own advice, or at least some contrary recommendations from his own intelligence community, and went on basically the recommendation of Bibi Netanyahu. And I think over the long term, if this war is not successful and we have a strategic failure in the Middle East with this war, I think this will be a profound problem for the relationship because of what Netanyahu has done.
Let me just play real quick. This is Megyn Kelly talking about the Situation Room meeting in which Trump was sold on this war and the atmospherics of it. Listen.
What led Trump, at 79 years old, to sit in there in that Situation Room when Bibi Netanyahu was seated as an equal?
Yeah.
Trump didn't even sit at the head of the table. Trump sat at the side of the table and Bibi was across from him as an equal in the American Situation Room, what led him to sit there and buy what that guy was selling hook, line, and sinker when every other president was able to see through that liar?
She's implying there's a judgment issue here. Do you think that there's reason to believe that?
I'm not going to respond to that. I'm going to respond to Secretary Kerry. He's right that the Israelis did approach American administration subsequently one after the other and said the Iran threat is metastasizing, and they did nothing about it. In fact, they restrained Israel to the degree that we had October 7th, and October 7th, Israel said, I'm not going to be restrained anymore. Likewise, we had Iran develop a ballistic missile program that was prohibitive and a uranium enrichment program that had gotten to 60% uranium. So yeah, all of that did happen over the course of several administrations that did nothing about it. And Secretary Kerry is saying, well, that was the correct course. No, it got us to here. It succeeded. The successive events got us to the point
The part that you're missing is that there was
the Obama deal in the middle there.
There was a deal that happened.
So Obama signed a deal which Trump ripped up that limited their uranium enrichment, that said no nuclear weapons, that allowed international inspectors to ensure their compliance.
It would have expired.
Can you actually just let me speak for like one frickin' second, bro?
Sure.
Thank you so much. There was a deal. And Trump came in and said, I can get a better deal. And he ripped it up. And he didn't get a better deal. And then he went into that country at the request of another country's leader, and he spent $50 billion and killed thousands of civilians and at least 13 American soldiers, and hundreds of American soldiers are injured. We've heard our bases, we've heard our radar. People hate America now. We had a president say that we're going to destroy an entire civilization. That's like if I came home and I held a gun to my wife's head I said, for 13 hours, I'm going to say, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to blow your brains out. Just kidding. We'll talk about it again in 2 weeks. That does not make you a good negotiator. That doesn't make you a good guy. It makes you psychotic. And he's the leader of the free world. And everyone knows that now. So no, this is not some winning strategy that Trump came in after years of being begged to help with Iran. This is not what's happening.
The JCPOA did not touch ballistic missiles, and it allowed for legitimized.
You know where we're at right now. It's not good.
Listen, Noah.
The Iran nuclear deal legitimized at 2025 the nuclear enrichment program. It expired at that point. It sunset, and it would have legitimized their ability to break out with a physical device.
Noah Rothman comes across like another loud MAGA voice who just keeps trying to talk over everyone. And I like how Leigh McGowan pushes back and basically says, hey, just let me speak for a minute, because that is exactly what viewers are thinking in that moment. And honestly, it is frustrating that these shows rarely control that kind of chaos, because it becomes impossible to follow the actual discussion. I remember seeing a similar situation on Chris Cuomo's show, where someone kept interrupting, and when a Democrat asked to cut the mic, Cuomo said they do not do that, which just does not make much sense, because if people can't even finish a sentence, then what is the point of having a discussion at all? And then Noah Rothman falls back on the same tired talking point you always hear, that Donald Trump was the only one with the courage to act, while others did not have the guts. But that argument doesn't really hold up, because it's not about courage, it's about judgment. And critics would say Trump was the only one willing to go along with Netanyahu's approach, whether that came from pressure, persuasion, or simply aligning with his own instincts. Some people argue Trump wanted this kind of escalation anyway, while others think he may have been influenced or flattered into it, especially given how often political leaders use praise and personal appeals to shape decisions. But either way, it raises serious questions about motivation and leadership. And at the end of the day, that is what makes this whole situation worth paying attention to, as we see what else comes out of this discussion.
Your right to not like the Iran nuclear deal. Trust me. All I'm suggesting is that Trump got rid of it without putting anything in its place to contain the nuclear problem. And so in the intervening time, Iran was basically free to do whatever they want, and that is what they did. And so at the end of the day, Trump could have said, I hate this Iran nuclear deal. We need to replace it with something that is stronger and better. He didn't do that. He just said, it's over and done with.
And so weeks and months of negotiations.
Yes.
Negotiations that were going nowhere because Iran would not cede its material.
But that's because
a failure?
Weeks and months of negotiation. The Iran nuclear deal, which you hate, took 18 months. It's not going to happen overnight. And this administration's feeling that you can just get this baked-in regime, 47 years in, to just turn on a dime in 2 weeks in negotiations, that doesn't make any sense, Noah.
They have a 30-second
No, it does, because over the course of those 18 months, we were spun into a bad deal. So yeah, if you were to engage with these people for a year and a half, you could end up with another bad deal.
You know what's not in this 10-point plan? Any discussion of the nuclear material. I think this is the real actual problem, which is no one here, the president doesn't even talk anymore about trying to get the nuclear material or keeping the nuclear material away.
Just talk about the dust.
Well,
I
look,
mean, the point here is that, like,
the problem
we
might
don't
be
know where we
even
will
worse than that, because I think the real problem is that the
They could break
Iranians,
out.
think
Yes.
that they have a point on the nuclear program, and the Americans have a different view of what should happen to the nuclear program, and they are not anywhere near each other on that key issue. So we'll see. I mean, negotiations kick off this weekend. We'll see how they do.
So Noah Rothman, as Abby Phillip is pointing out here, clearly has an issue with the deal that Obama made. And the reality is a lot of them oppose that deal largely because it came from Obama, because if a Republican had pushed the exact same agreement, there's a strong chance they would have backed it. But beyond that, Noah Rothman has long been against it because there has been this ongoing push for decades from these circles toward confrontation with Iran, and that mindset keeps showing up again and again in these discussions. And Leigh McGowan does a good job of calling that out directly in her exchange with him, especially as he keeps interrupting and talking over her, which feels like a deliberate strategy to control the conversation rather than engage with the actual points being made. And at the same time, it is important to recognize that this is not a conflict most Americans are eager to be part of, as public opinion has consistently shown strong resistance to deeper involvement, particularly when it comes to escalating tensions abroad. And when you look at figures like Megyn Kelly, Tucker Carlson, and Alex Jones now creating some distance from Trump on this issue, it raises questions about motivation, because while their criticism might influence parts of their audience, it also comes after they played a role in building support for him in the first place. So now, as the situation becomes more unpopular, it is fair to ask whether this shift is driven by genuine disagreement or by a need to maintain credibility and relevance with their audience going forward. And that is likely going to shape how they position themselves in the future as they try to separate their identity from Trump while still holding on to their base. So the bigger question here is whether this change is sincere or simply strategic, and that is something worth thinking about as you watch how all of this continues to unfold. So what do you think about this panel with Leigh McGowan, Noah Rothman, and the rest on Abby Phillip's show? And so I want to know where you stand on this entire discussion. Let me know what you think about in the comments. Make sure to like and subscribe for more.